So it's officially attempt number 3 on starting this podcast. I am Jason Khalipa, joined alongside Gabe, Giannis for our regular episode. I'm excited to chat with you, all things train, protect, provide, and talk a little bit about our legacies, a little bit about our history, and make it happen. So congratulations to you and the family. We'll start off with for becoming U.S. citizens. Your mom and dad, excuse me, I should say.
That's right. My mom and dad. Yeah, man, big deal, special week. And it's funny because it's kind of one of those things that like you wait, my parents have been here for over 30 years and it just happened. But then when it happens, it like, you go, you take the test, which is like a verbal test, which they were super nervous about. And then the funny part that we were talking about was, they've been studying for this thing and they probably know more about the United States than, maybe not me, because I tend to geek out on some of this stuff, but you,
yeah,
based on your knowledge of the 3 branches of government and honestly, most people, which, is interesting. Right. And they were taking it super seriously. It was funny. I called my dad one time last week just to catch up. And I could hear in the background, he had like on the TV, it must've been like a YouTube video or something of like to help him study. And I could hear it in the background. It was just so funny that he's like, at home listening to like, some guy explaining the history of the US and stuff. So, but I think it's super cool that that's a part of the process, right? That there's this expectation for people that want to, that aren't US citizens, but are going to become, that do have like a base knowledge of the language, the country, the history of the country, so on and so forth. So, it's been impressive to watch them kind of go through that process. But what I was going to say is, it's been kind of like 30 years. It's been like a bunch of like, paperwork and waiting. And then like you go, you do this interview thing. And then they're like, all right, next week is your ceremony. And then like, it all kind of happened so quick. So it's been a crazy week. But like super positive. It's just, especially with my parents, I've been talking to them a lot about, just the experience of being here for as long as we have, and talked about a lot of stories that like, I don't necessarily remember because I was so young. And now that like, I'm a parent, like really appreciating how hard it was for them, comparing it to like how I would say easy we have it now. Like I've mentioned this before, but we're so fortunate that we have grandparents, like, we have Ariel's parents who literally share a property line with us. Like they're a stone's throw. And my parents are 50 minutes away in town. And, when my parents immigrated here 30 years ago, and I was a little kid, I was 2 years old, they came alone. Like we had no family here, zero. They had some people that were like friends of friends of friends that we got connected to that kind of helped like my dad get his job and like, able to help us like find an apartment, like how to like, get a car as soon as possible so we can move around. Like we definitely had some people that were, connections of connections that helped out, but no family, like no one that like we actually were like, oh, we're going to go. And like my brother already lives there, or like, whatever, none of that. And I was 2 at the time. So my mom had me, a small kid, and to think of how they navigated through all that, like not knowing the language, like having no idea what they were going to do for work, having no idea where that we were going to live, no car, no nothing, and just like figuring it out and comparing that to like what I have now that we have kids, right? Like we have kids, but we have grandparents, we have my sister, Ariel has her brother, like we are set up, like I have a great job that I enjoy and that I love. I work from home. Like, holy shit, man. Like I am so grateful for the situation that we have, but man, like you just really start appreciating for like what they went through and what they did. And the fact that like the biggest thing is I also like never felt growing up, even though now thinking back on it, like, we didn't have much, but I never felt like we were like missing anything, never. Yeah. Like at no point was I like, man, like we don't have this thing or we can't do this thing. Like even vacations, man, like every single year we would go camping because camping was relatively inexpensive. Like we went, set up a tent. And dude, it was some of the fondest memories I have as a childhood is going camping with my dad. We didn't travel anywhere, even out of state. We didn't fly on any vacations. Those things just weren't realistic for us growing up. And again, comparing to all this stuff now, like, Shay is going to be 9 months old and he's been to California like 3 times, Miami once. We're able to take him everywhere. And that's going to be the case for him as he grows up. Like, he's not going to remember any of these trips, obviously, but he's going to be able to travel and do all these things. And it's just, I don't know, man, it's been a big week for me to like just really appreciate how amazing of an upbringing I had, despite not having a lot of the things that I have and can give Shay now. And it's all a testament to just like my parents being extremely positive and extremely hardworking, like both of those, like working really hard, but never feeling like, oh my God, like we are working ourselves to the bone. And like my dad not showing up as like a really fun dad. And like I said, not going on vacation. So yeah, man, I didn't know we were going to go here on the podcast. It's funny, but been thinking a lot and just overall, just super grateful, man. Like so grateful. And what I said in the post, like grateful for this country, man.
What do you mean we didn't know we were going to go here? I told you, I was like, bro, we got to talk about your parents becoming citizens.
Yeah. But I didn't think I was going to share maybe even as much as I've shared so far, but yeah, man. Yeah, grateful for them. And honestly, man, like really, really grateful for this country. I know that like, there's a flag behind me for a reason.
Walk on. It's like my dad. So we have very similar backgrounds in that sense. Like, so my dad came here when he was 18. So my dad came from Iran. Very, very similar to Gabe in the sense, like he came here, he had like a cousin here, but didn't know anybody, didn't know the language, didn't know anything. Right. And it just changes people's perspective. I think, my mom, she grew up in Rhode Island. Her family was from Italy. They ended up settling in Rhode Island, and then she was born there and then ended up coming to California. And so she knew the language and whatnot. My dad didn't. And so my dad's out here. And then during that time, there was a big revolution a couple of years later in Iran. And during that revolution, my grandma and grandpa were kicked out of Iran. Like, they just left, and they left with nothing, and they came here with nothing. My grandpa had a hole drilled out of his shoe, and he put a couple $100 in there, and they came over here. And from that point, it's like, dude, they started a dry cleaning business, just grind it out, kind of like your parents. Like, they just found an opportunity, they made it happen. And it's funny because when you talk to people like my grandparents, or you talk to my dad, they love this country more than anything else in the world. And they love it because if you work hard, you could be anything you want to be. And like, it's just interesting perspective from people who weren't born here. I find that there's just a less sense of entitlement and there's more gratefulness for it. And I think that's something we could all reflect on and say, hey, like, we could be more grateful for the opportunities and things we have, whether it be your family around or whatever. But imagine coming to a country, dude, and knowing no one, not knowing the language, and having to make something of yourself. Like, imagine what that teaches you and the confidence it builds when you know that you're able to build something from literally nothing. Like, that's powerful stuff, man. And I feel like that's a great example of what your parents did. And in a lot of ways, so did mine, It's
for sure, man.
Cool story. And my dad would always tell me, he's always like, growing up, he's like, dude, it's like, Jason, they could take everything away from you, but they can't take away your education. He would tell me that like every week. He would tell me that. And the reason why he was so like kind of gung ho on that, or so like bought into that model, was because my dad saw someone who had everything and got everything taken away from them. My grandpa was really rich, or was well off, working for the oil industry, and went from being well off working in the oil industry to literally coming to the United States with nothing and having to start over again. But what he did take with him was his education, his ability to work hard, his ability to do things. And that's why my dad would just tell me that every single week. And it's resonated with me, and it's not just in terms of college, it's also just in terms of education you could do. Like, right now, you're going to the school of Alex Hormozi, right? Like, you're going to that school, or I know you went to other school too, but I'm just saying, like, we could find ways to educate ourselves to be so valuable that if it did come to the point where you lost everything, you could build it back up again.
Dude, and I love that. I love that you brought that up, and I love that your dad was so adamant about that, because it's so true, man. And people don't realize how important it is, not just from like getting a piece of paper from an accredited college, but like literally having skills. And we talk about this all the time too, because whatever were to happen, like, no one's going to take the skills that you've learned on the BJJ mats, the skills that you've learned on the range, the skills that, like, acquiring skills and just becoming a more well-rounded, educated human is something that, regardless of what happens, you can take with you to the next thing or whatever. And that is such a powerful thing to have in your back pocket. Because, to your point, like everything could go away tomorrow. And I'm super confident that like I could find somewhere to provide value and, build a career again or whatever. And that is also super empowering because then, you don't feel like you're trapped in any way. And I think it makes you more successful at whatever you're working on now because you can do it for all the right reasons, as opposed to like feeling like you have no other choice or no other options. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, taking one of our gyms, for example, like this is a great example for me that helped me earn my confidence. Like COVID really affected our business tremendously. I don't need to tell any gym owner who's listening or, anybody who knows anything about the fitness space knows that we got hit hard if you own brick and mortar gyms. But one of our gyms was shut down for 13 months, and to go from doing very high levels of revenue to zero, like literally zero, not 1,000, not 10,000, zero. And then to build it back up to better than where we were before, man, it's a testament to you develop all these skills over time and they could take it away and you could build it back. And we should all be striving to get there. And I'm not wishing that on anybody. And frankly, I wish it never happened, but it did earn our confidence more to see a business go from a lot to a little to back up to again has been powerful for me in particular.
You mentioned Alex Hormozi, and one of the recent pieces of
you're the biggest. One day we're gonna, because I obviously I connect with him on a regular basis. I'm gonna bring him to you, like, because he lives, he's out in Vegas.
Yeah.
When I meet him, I gotta bring you with me because you are a big Alex Hormozi fan.
Yeah, that's the stage that I'm in now. Because I mean,
you'd blush.
What?
You'd blush
if I met him.
Yeah, you'd get all red.
I don't think I would blush, but I'd be very grateful for sure. I think I appreciate his like approach of literally just because it's super interesting. He talks about it in his book because what he's doing is putting out as much free value and content as possible. And he's very transparent about the reason he's doing it. And the reason he's doing it is because he's currently taking these minority stakes in these companies. So he literally wants to help as many people as possible get to the point where he can invest in that business and continue to build his portfolio. So it's nice because I get what he's doing and he's so transparent about why he's doing it. But anyway, yeah, dude, I'd love to meet him. I'd love to chat with him.
Yeah, I'm gonna text him after this because he I know he has provided a lot of value to a lot of people. He's a great example of the
100%
Gary V, like jab, 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 and then right hook or whatever, in the sense that like he's just giving, and with no expectation, right?
Yeah. And the one question that I would honestly want to ask him, and we don't have to go completely on a tangent, is that prior to like me, like really diving into a lot of his content, he had kind of like at least from what I saw in like the CrossFit affiliate group and some places, his prior company Gym Launch had like a very like not
kind of polarizing
great reputation.
Yeah.
And he's the one that really popularized the 6-week challenge that is usually talked about negatively in a lot of circles because, they charge a bunch up front. Gym Launch does, or at least this is, outsider looking in. And I'd love to ask him about like what the service actually looks like at his side of it. But, they charge you a bunch up front. And then what they do is give you the playbook to run these 6-week challenges that fills your gym with people, right? You run the ads, whatever, you get a bunch of people. But then what I've heard is that for a lot of gyms, it kind of leaves them in a really bad place because there are people that don't stay.
Right.
There are people that end up, like really impacting the experience of your actual members. And it's a way to, yes, fill your gym, but doesn't lead to like long-term actually people staying, success, building a sustainable business, so on and so forth. So I'm curious what kind of like his side is of that. Like, is that gym owners didn't have the systems in place to like maintain people? Is that this wasn't a good fit for a lot of the gyms that they were working for? I'd just be curious because prior to this, I actually felt like a lot of people really didn't like the guy. But the more you dive into his stuff, it's just, one thing that I think is really important with a lot of people that put out content out there is that you can very much separate the fact that like, are they providing value with their content that you can take away and it can improve your skill set, and separate that from like, I would like that person or not. I think that a lot of people get really caught up in like, some people come off with some bravado, they come off with some ego. Like Gary Vee is another example. Like some people just don't like the way he is, right? Like he's too over the top, like the positivity thing, you kind of eye roll, so on and so forth. Like, the fact that he's always like, yeah, you're 60, like you're still so young. Like people make fun of him for some of the stuff that he says and they think he's too much. But I think that isn't a reason to throw the baby out with bathwater, right? Like there's still so much you can get from the content these people are putting out, separate to like you vibing with his personality or whatever. And that's what I would encourage anyone to do with a lot of these people is I think some people disregard people wholesale too soon without like really taking into account the fact that there's still very valuable stuff you can get from what they're putting out.
Yeah, I think I was talking to Hormozi or one of his people a while ago. And I think their perception on it is like, look, they provide tools. Those tools have worked really well for some owners, not for others, but it's really owner dependent. And if you like execute accordingly on what they're trying to get across. So I think if you ask them, he would probably say that like, hey, we provided this system. They chose to buy it. They chose to execute on it. We gave them all the tools and it was up to them to be successful. And because you can't make people do the work. Like you can give them the tools, but if they don't do all the necessary steps, like that's outside of his control. And I think that's important for all of us to realize, like even as a coach, right? Like we want to see our members be successful. We can provide them all the tools we want, but if they're not putting in the work and if they're not staying consistent, et cetera, nothing we do is going to matter. But yeah, I will ask him that because I actually, we should have him on the podcast too. I gotta, but yeah, he's been instrumental. And I think like a guy like Gary Vee, and also like if you're watching people online, you can get inspiration without like liking all the different areas of their life. I think that makes sense to me, right? Like you could just get
100%.
Oh, I'm getting fired up for this guy about this particular thing. Like, I don't know, shit, even with me, like there's probably some people like, dude, this guy's way over the top on talking about jiu-jitsu. It's like, yeah, well, I love jiu-jitsu, but maybe you're cool with me talking about the way I don't know, raise the kids or whatever, right? But like you could find things you get inspiration from, and we're just sharing, take things you don't like and just let them go. That's it.
Yeah, with anyone, right? Like take the things that you can apply. Some things you might even disagree with, like don't apply those, don't take those. But I think we're very quick, especially nowadays with a lot of things, right? Like cast judgment and either like they go in the good bucket or the bad bucket and you just like disregard completely or you buy into them 100%, where there's nuance to everything, right? Like with anyone, there are some things that I'll agree with a lot more than other things, but I'll still, dive deep and like be like, all right, like what about this can I apply into my life? Like, what about this can really help with where I am in my journey as whatever, like fitness, professionally, personally. There's always like things that like also may not be like the best fit for where you are right now, but they might be in like 5 years when you evolve and circumstances change. Like that's a big learning that I've had with nutrition and fitness specifically, right? Like stuff that I was subscribing to 100% 5 years ago are very different than what I'm subscribing to now from a nutrition
it just takes
and
time
training
and perspective.
standpoint.
I think, and also you got to be careful because online, I mean, I've met some people. So I've met a lot of people that are quote unquote influencers. I would say the majority of the time they are who they are online. Majority, at least the circle that I hang out with. But I've also met people who are influencers who are not who they are online. And if you're looking at someone online, you're trying to take personal characteristics from them and not just inspiration in specific areas, just be aware that online you could have a certain persona, especially on social media like TikTok, Instagram, whatever, not long form like this. It's a little bit easier in long form to pick up the bullshit. But on social media channels like that, just be aware because some of these people are not who you think they are. A lot of them are, especially in our circle, but not all of them. So that's just another little nugget to make sure you stay aware of.
And that's interesting coming from you because you do have a very unique perspective because you're a part of some of these circles, right? Like you get a behind the curtain look on like you're friends with Rich, you're friends with Josh Bridges. Like these are people that, I've been able to connect kind of through you. And it's been interesting because I mean, so far everyone I've met, I feel like is very much what you see out there. Like I remember at Rogue, what was it, 2 years ago when you were like, hey, we're having lunch here. And I went and it was, just Rich, Josh, you, Hillary, Ashley, and me and Ariel. And it was really cool to just spend some time with you guys, like shooting the shit, because it very much felt like everything that I've heard from them in podcasts and stuff. Like what you see is what you get with those guys specifically. But that's why it's cool coming from you, because obviously you're a part of these circles that most people are more outsiders looking in.
Yeah. I mean, I think most of the time when it comes to influencers, I think that you could get people who are, walking the walk, talking the talk. I do think the ones that are like very scripted or clickbaity or whatnot, chances are that they're putting on a persona for social that they aren't necessarily that same person offline. And it's hard to tell the difference between the two. So just something that, and maybe over time, I think more of these people will be exposed. But I've been around a few of them where I feel like we are just talking or creating content just to talk or create content to get clicks instead of actually trying to make an impact or share a message. And that's where I'm just like, I'm good. I'm moving on. Like I'd rather work with people who really want to try and make an impact, really share their life and help. And obviously in the process, do some things that might be a little clickbaity or whatever to get attention, but it should be an authentic version of that person. If you're just doing this with like this whole like mission to create a fake business to then sell people stuff, I just think that's really wrong.
Won't name names, but I may know who you're talking about.
I don't even know. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. I have a few people in my mind, but anyways, yeah, we will not.
We can. The reason I originally brought up Hormozi because there's a recent piece of content, just bringing it back to what we were talking about, like before, and adversity, and the story of your parent and my parents, and how that kind of like shapes you in a way. One thing that he says that I think is just an important, he doesn't call them mind shift changes, he calls them reframes, but reframing like the fact that like, you might have circumstances that absolutely, like objectively, someone would say like, that makes things harder for you.
Yeah.
Like 100%. But instead of focusing on like, hey, this thing makes it harder for me to whatever, be a successful entrepreneur, like grow my career, make money, attract, whatever. There's always someone out there that has it worse than you and does it better, right? Like 100%. There is someone out there that whatever your obstacle is, had it worse and still did it better. Like for you to think that you're the one that has that obstacle to like its highest extent, and that's the reason that's holding you back, is crazy, right? Like if you like literally say that out loud, like you wouldn't even believe that.
Yeah.
And it's really, I think, powerful to have that reframe where you're like, yeah, like, whatever. It's really difficult for me to put on muscle. I'm a hard gainer. My genetics are working against me. Like shit. Well, guess what? There is 100% someone out there that has worse genetics than you, is more of a hard gainer, is more slow twitch muscle fibers, whatever excuse you want to come up with, that has still gotten more jacked than you. So your excuse by definition then like doesn't matter. You're just not doing enough to overcome it. So I think that to me is something that I've been thinking a lot about. And I think it's super powerful, no matter what it is, whatever, hand of cards you got dealt, someone out there has it worse and is doing it better, period.
Yeah. I mean, I think about that a lot with our kids, right? Like how much do you give them? We've talked about this, like how much do you give? How much do you not give? I was talking to my brother-in-law the other day and just talking about when is the right time to be cut off from the family, not the family, like financially, I mean, where there is something to be said about this like subconscious concept that that you'll be okay versus like, bro, you got to make it. And a buddy of mine, I was having breakfast with him the other day, and he's been a really powerful mentor for me. His name's Joe Gigantino. He taught me a lot about business and sales, and he just became a grandpa like 6 days ago. And he has 3 kids and they're thriving and they're all doing great. And he was talking about his son, and like he was talking about how like he wants to give, but he needs to also know when not to give because it might help that decision. He was telling a story where he was him and his wife were in California, and he had bought a gym, and the gym ended up going under. So like at the time he had nothing. He had nowhere to live. He had no money. He had nothing. And he gets on a payphone and he calls his dad. He says, "Dad, I need your help. I have nothing. I don't know what to do. Can I come home for a little bit, get my bearings and come back?" And his dad's like, no, you can't. And then just hung up. And it required Joe to reflect and be like, bro, I got to get my hustle on. So they ended up moving in with his sister-in-law for 2 weeks. He worked like all, 24 hours a day, whatever he could to get the hell out of that spot because he didn't want to live with his sister-in-law, and ended up, buying a new business, becoming successful and thriving. And he said, if it wasn't for that call, he doesn't know what the future of his life would have been. What if he had gone back to Central California and found a whole different career path, a whole different whatever. But as a parent, it's like, when do you say no And when do you get them uncomfortable? And when you get them uncomfortable and they have to face that adversity, that's where they could potentially truly thrive. So that was an interesting story I just heard 2 days ago when I was having coffee, and I thought it was relatable to this conversation. Because like, I mean, your dad and mom had no one to call, but imagine if they did have someone to call. If they had
Right.
made the call, would that have changed anything? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it's something that like we have talked about it before because it's something that's going to be very much in our control, like you and me specifically, where it wasn't really in our parents' control so much. Like my parents couldn't help me to an extent. Like I had to start working as soon as I could start working if I wanted stuff because they literally like couldn't like if I wanted, some new clothes aside from like the bare minimums or like some cool pair of shoes, like I had to work to buy that stuff. Whereas like now, like I know I'm going to be in a different position where like when Shay grows up, the stuff that he wants, like I definitely have the ability to give those to him. So it's going to be much more of like, a test of like making that decision for me to like, do I give that to him or is that an opportunity to teach a lesson of earning these things that you want? Which in my head, obviously, like I know what the option is, but even now, like I can realize how fun it is to like just give them stuff, how like awesome rewarding it feels to do that stuff. So I know it's going to take like discipline on my part to be like, at what point am I doing more detriment than good?
For sure, dude. For sure. I mean, with it, one of the things that's been really tough for me lately is that like Kaden, he's currently playing 3 sports. He's playing football, flag football, which is really fun to watch.
No surprises there. 3-sport Kaden, zero surprises.
Dude, it's so much fun to watch. Soccer, which is also pretty fun to watch, and then baseball, which is fun to watch, and they're all different for different reasons.
Dude, I'm telling you right now, Kaden's not a soccer player.
Dude,
baseball, I can see him being like a power hitting catcher for sure. Power hitting catcher, Kaden, I see it happening. Football, no brainer. Dude, he's not playing
so
soccer.
Funny. It was so funny because that's the reason why I say it's funny. Because in football, he's running after the quarterback trying to get the flag, right? So it's fun to watch. In baseball, dude, you watch him play catcher. It's really something fun to watch. Like he's so zoned in. He's so like, there's something there that's fun for me to watch. But soccer, the other day I watched him play soccer, and the ball's coming, and he just swing and a miss. He tries to kick it, but just imagine this big kid, Kaden. The ball's like perfectly coming at him, like it's the perfect opportunity. He's on defense. There's an offensive player running, and he goes for this kick and just completely misses the ball. And I'm on the sidelines just laughing. He ends up grabbing it and taking it up or whatever, but to your point, he's just not really built for that. But I think that's even more of a reason to also do it. And
yes.
You're exposing to new skills,
yes.
You're doing different things. And he needs to know what it feels like to not be the best at something or not great at something, because it'll help him build empathy and compassion. Because I see the way sometimes he talks about other players or himself. And obviously we put that in check real quick, but it's a natural occurrence where you want to say like, hey, dude, like I'm performing subconsciously. You're saying I'm performing better than the others around me, and it builds up your confidence. But you also need to get knocked down so you can have that humbleness to be the guy who could really be great and just not talk about it. So it's been fun, dude. It's been fun for different areas. But the reason why I brought that up is that we were at the store the other day and he wanted a catcher's mitt. And it's hard for me because I want to try and provide tools, especially I want to buy him now because like if I think he's going to be playing sports for a long time, like I don't want to buy him a new catcher's mitt 5 years from now, like, or I don't want to buy him a new, like, I don't know, batting net or tee or whatever. Like, I'd rather get more use out of it now if I think he's going to use it for the long term and not buy it when he only has a year left of baseball or something like that. So it's like this catch-22 I'm struggling with because I want to go get things, but then I also don't want to like over invest into a sport. But watching those 3 sports has been a lot of fun. I should send you some videos sometime.
Oh, dude. But I love that you said that. And because I was going to follow up your explanation of it, it's not soccer, maybe not being the most natural fit with like, that's the reason he should be doing it. From like an athletic perspective, I think that the reason that he's not naturally good at that is because it's challenging areas of athleticism that he'll benefit from, right? Like footwork, stamina, like start and stop. Like those are things that he will be able to get that will benefit him in football or baseball if he wants to be good at that, but that he'll get by doing soccer, even though he's not good. And then obviously the intangibles of like just not being naturally the best at everything you do to like knock you down a little bit and just really have you have empathy that like, hey, I'm going to be really good at baseball maybe, but there's going to be a kid that isn't. And that's fine because that's me in soccer, right?
Dude, it's the same thing like being a coach and you're a really good CrossFit coach, and all of a sudden you go take jujitsu and you realize what it's like to be a beginner again. And you place yourself in the position of these athletes that are coming in, and you're the coach, but like when you're new at something, it's tough. When you're not great at something, it's tough to be that person. And I want to expose them to many of those things because it'll only make them better as a teammate, which I think is the most important thing. So yeah, dude, that it's been I'm telling you, man, I'm laughing out loud because it's just like this vision of just like intensity and wanting to crush the ball and then just swing and a miss. It's great. But hey, I wanted to bring up something. I was on the phone. I was doing a webinar. Yeah.
Just really quick before we move on for the parenting thing, because I heard this and I love the saying, so I'll share it. When it comes to and how I think about, what I want to serve for Shay as he grows up is you always want to be a safety net, but not a hammock, right? So that's the difference. You want to be a safety net, but not a hammock. Like you should be there in case like, hitting rock, but like they need your, like you'll always be there to make sure that like nothing bad happens. But I think it's easy to become a hammock where now it's comfortable, right? Like now it's a place where you can just relax, lay down, as opposed to a safety net, which is meant to literally like catch you and make sure you don't get hurt. Like that to me was a really powerful like difference between the two.
So be a safety net, not a hammock.
Be a safety net, not a hammock. That's right.
Dude, I like that. So I was talking to Thomas DeLauer, and we were doing a webinar for Customs and Border Protection 2 days ago. And you know what he brought up when it comes to nutrition? So we were talking about ketosis. We were talking about a bunch of things, and I actually wrote this down. I thought this was pretty interesting. So he and then I have something else I want to talk about, but he talked about fasted workouts. So he talked about fasted workouts as a nutritional weight vest, which I thought was interesting. So basically depleting your energy, right? Going fasted. And it's like your nutritional weight vest. So I'll give you a couple of sound bites from it. Carb is a fuel. Relax your brain by not constantly giving it carbohydrates, like giving it a state of like homeostasis by, basically going in a state of ketosis, what he was really talking about. Talked about MCT oil, which I found to be interesting. But this is the number one thing he talked about that I thought was really unique. In his car, he keeps baggies of protein powder. And I was like, I hope it's not white. He might get pulled over and be like, what the hell is that? He's like, no, it's chocolate flavored. I'm like, okay. So imagine chocolate flavored protein powder in Ziploc bags in your glove compartment. And before any time you go out to eat, you pound a protein shake right before you go into the restaurant. So I'm asking him, I'm like, dude, like, do you do that because you want to get full, blah, blah. But think about it this way. The first thing I do if I'm going in for like a restaurant, I'm like really getting after it, is like, dude, there's chips, there's French fries, there's all kinds of stuff. So I'm loading carbohydrates, bread, right? And so what his argument was is like, load up a protein shake. Let's just say it's like 30 grams of protein. Maybe it's going to be like 70 calories, but it's not many calories. Like it's not a lot of calories, a lot of protein, and it will help slow the digestion of some of these carbohydrates and balance out the protein to carbohydrate ratio that you have when most restaurants, most of the time. So what he said is he can count on a handful of times where he has not had a protein shake before going to a restaurant. And so it was an interesting idea. I was wondering what you thought about it, because not only do I think you'd feel a little bit more satisfied and fuller earlier, which hopefully wouldn't ruin your meal because it's kind of light, it's a light protein shake, but I wonder what it would do from just a digestion perspective of not like overloading on carbohydrates and having you feel like shit an hour later.
Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense, man. I never thought of it like literally as far as like having it in the car, but I'll tell you what I've been doing for probably the past year and a half now that I've been like incessantly, tracking my macros and just making like I'm on a gaining phase and then I'm on a cutting phase. Like eating out has been a part of always, right? Like for the past year and a half, like us maintaining a date night is important for a lot of reasons. And so we don't do it often. I would say we probably go out, at least once every 2 weeks, but most of the time, like once a week, like we'll have one day on the weekend where we do go out to eat. And I'm also, unless I'm like in a pretty strict deficit, I don't really care what I order. Like I'm not going there
Yeah.
and like making decisions on the menu based on like whatever. Like I'm literally just like, that sounds good. I'm going to get that.
Right. Which is the way it
But
should be, in my opinion. But yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, again, like if you have specific goals in a very specific season, then sure, right? But I think that yeah, detracting from like the experience and going out there, I think takes away from it. But anyway, what I always do is prioritize protein throughout the day. So same thing, just not as maybe immediate as like, you know, I'm in the car right before I go in doing it. But that's been one of the benefits for me of like tracking everything I eat is like, hey, we're gonna go out to eat today. We're gonna go Mexican. We know that there's going to be chips. I'm going to have no ability to tell them not to keep refilling my chips every time they ask. So I'm going to eat a
Absolutely.
shit ton of chips.
A good salted, legit Mexican chip.
Dude, it's so good. So good. So what am I going to eat before we go out to dinner? The one thing you don't want to do that I feel a lot of people do, not a lot of people, but some people do, is they won't eat anything. Or they'll try and like, hey, I'm
Yeah.
saving it for dinner. You don't want to do that either, because then
And those chips
to
really
your
look good.
point, yeah, then you're like literally going to eat until you like feel sick because you're going to get there and be so hungry. So I've done the same thing in that, like that morning, my breakfast, a little bit more protein heavy, a little bit less calorie dense. Lunch, same thing. And I'll even have a snack before dinner that, again, sometimes it might be a protein shake. Sometimes it'll be more like Greek yogurt with some fruit because I just really enjoy that. But to your point, I mean, it's essentially what we've been doing, but not as immediate as like, you know, having it in the car right before we go in. But it makes perfect sense. I really like that tip.
Dude, yeah, it's so funny because as soon as he told me that, I ended up emailing Jocko Fuel. I was like, guys, I need some protein starter for my car. I want to have milk. And so, you know, we're having another men's club workout. I'm actually gonna have this one at the house. And so I ordered in a bunch of milk to like it's their protein drink to give them. But yeah, dude, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna see how it goes. What I don't want it to do is interfere with my experience. So like Ash and I, if we go out on a date night or whatever, like, you know, like we'll probably have a couple cocktails or a couple glasses of wine. Just it is what it is. I would say that it probably makes sense for me to have a protein shake before I go and consume a couple glasses of wine or cocktails because of the insulin spike and blood sugar and whatnot. That's what my logical is saying. But what I don't want it to do is by taking this protein shake, if I feel all bloated at dinner, if I feel disconnected, if I feel like I'm trying too hard to be too healthy, that's not the goal of that particular thing. But if I could do it and it could help balance me out and I could feel better later on at night, dude, I'm all about it. So I'm gonna try it. I'll report back on how it goes.
Yeah. And that's where I think that like an in-between step would be to just prioritize more protein throughout the day when you know you're going to go out versus smashing a protein shake right before you go in, right? Like I think that to me is a little bit not extreme, but like a little bit more extreme than like doing the thing that does make perfect logical sense to me, which is like, hey, I know that at night I'm gonna go out to a restaurant. There's gonna be a lot of tasty carbs and fat, and I want to always have a certain amount of protein, carbs, and fat throughout the day. So logically, that just means let me prioritize high protein, low carb, low fat breakfast and lunch so I can do what I can do during dinner and not have to worry about it. That to me seems like the obvious logical thing to do. Can you accomplish that by smashing a protein shake in the parking lot of the restaurant before you go in? Sure. It seems a little bit unnecessary, maybe,
Yeah,
if
the
you're
other thing
planning the rest of your day accordingly.
for
For
sure.
that reason, too, like,
What? Oh,
especially
just
if you're
like a
not,
little, yeah.
well, no, especially if you're someone that like, you know, because I know a lot of people don't do like great with whey. Also, depending on like what it is that you're having, like the last thing you want to do is like sit down for a nice dinner and
Yeah,
be
like,
like, you
I mean,
know, feeling bloated or like even worse, like starting to get gassy. You don't want to get gassy at dinner.
no, you don't want to get gassy at dinner, especially if you're in a booth. You don't want to get
No,
gassy.
no, dude. Oh
Dude.
no.
So, but yeah, I thought that was an interesting thing that you brought up. And the other thing that you brought up was the MCT oil, which is something that I have, you know, I've been putting Bub's MCT oil in my coffee for a while. And he was discussing it in terms, obviously in terms of brain function and whatnot, but he was also talking about taking MCT oil and honey before like training, which I've never heard of that. So I'm gonna find out more details on this because we kind of like we were pretty deep in the weeds. Like he was getting super deep on the weeds of but you know, there's MCT oil, and there's also powder. I put powder in my coffee. What he was saying is that the mixture of that fat with a little bit of like honey is a very powerful brain body component to get you ready for some hard training? I don't know. I'm gonna try. I'll let you know.
Yeah, I mean, try it. I think that, the one thing that I've come around, going back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, and just how much like my perspective on training and nutrition specifically has shifted over the past 5 years, is that I do think that a lot of these guys out there, and Thomas DeLauer, I follow him a little bit. I haven't like done one of my like content deep dives on him. Super smart guy for sure. Obviously fucking looks the part. Like you see the guy and you're like, all right, something's working. With that being said, I do think that, it's one of those people out there that does seem to subscribe to like a very specific, he's like much more on like the keto side, like that side. And so a lot of the studies that he will point out and stuff, like, because the one thing that I've realized is like, you can have two very smart people on opposite ends of the spectrum. They will both find the equal amount of very convincing studies that prove each other wrong. Like you can find a study now that proves literally anything is good for you and anything is bad for you. Like, it was funny because like literally what you were telling me, I can find you a study, and I know it's out there because I remember this was one of the things that I was big on, that would tell him that the worst thing he can do is have protein sitting in a Ziploc plastic bag in a car until he's going to have it, because when you have plastic, especially in the heat sitting there, all the like chemicals from the plastic leak out into the protein, and it's supposed to be like one of the worst things for you. So am I saying that that's a bad idea for that reason? No, but I'm saying that like you can easily find something that would be like, dude, like that's the worst thing you could do for you. So long-winded way of saying, I think people just have to try. I think people just have to try different things, and like it's easy to underestimate how much your body will tell you what's working for you and what isn't. Like,
for sure.
Do you feel better? No. If you do, great, keep doing that. It doesn't really matter what person X is saying out there. Like, your body tells you, hey, this is working, or hey, this isn't.
I mean, dude, my body's been telling me lately that Honey Nut Cheerios with some whole lactose-free milk at night has been working for me. So that's what my body's speaking to me.
Dude, cereal at night is one of the best feelings on the planet.
Dude, I'm telling you, bro.
And if you're training as hard as Jason Khalipa is, I'm telling you now, and I probably wouldn't have said this, 3 years ago, like there's nothing wrong with you doing that.
I'm so glad that I have your approval on that, because it feels so good. And it's
one of those things though with nutrition and training. You know how they say that like the more you learn about something, the more you realize you don't know about something. Yeah. Like that's very much where I'm at now. Like I obviously know more now than I did 3 years ago, but what that tells me is I literally know nothing. So no one should listen to what I'm saying as if it were like absolute fact. It's just what's worked for me and kind of where I'm at now.
Dude, same here, man. What I do know is that I got a no-gi jiu-jitsu tournament that I got to get ready for. So I need to incorporate some more wrestling, and then start lining up that tactical games that you and I are doing, and the bodybuilding competition that you're doing.
Oh, let's go.
Dude, we got to find one of those. Well, we didn't really get to the train, protect, provide like I pitched in the beginning.
We'll save it, because that'll be a really good episode. I really want to dive into, because anyone that's been following the content that we've been putting out, that's a theme that's come up, and I think it's going to be a big part of what we want to talk about and what we want to be about. And I think it's worth diving into each of those three, what it means to us, and also like how interconnected they are into, I think, what it means to be the type of guys, the type of men that we're aspiring to be, like you and me. And I think anyone else that's like listening to this stuff, subscribing to the newsletter, so on and so forth. So I think that it would be a very worthwhile, but like its own episode for sure.
Yeah, man. I think that, if you have not subscribed to the newsletter, you need to do that immediately. The best way to do that is go into podcast show notes, go click on the Never Zero newsletter, and register for it. It's completely free. There's a ton of value, and I engage with you. So after 6 hours, I think it is, they get another email asking about certain things about training. Just message me back, and I'll message you back. It's really me. It's not some AI crazy bot. Maybe we'll have something like that 5 years from now, but for now, it's me. And then the idea is like, I want to engage. I want to find out what's working, and I want to create a network specifically of men, but also women, but that want to connect. The men's club ruck that we did the other day, I think we talked about this a little bit, Gabe, but it's like, I just felt like it was powerful, man. It was powerful. It was powerful for these dads to connect. And I want to do another workout. We're going to be doing another workout just like that. And maybe you don't have a local community you can get with, but maybe you can connect online. And we're going to be putting out, training programs in the future, all kinds of stuff. But the best way to connect now is through the newsletter. Connect with me, and then I'll connect with you. And then we'll start to build out this group. And I think the goal is, we put out a podcast with Rich Froning a little bit ago. And for so long, I was trying to beat him at the CrossFit Games. And now it's like, I don't want to beat him. That's not the right term. I want to compete with him to be the best dad on the planet. Like, and in a healthy competition, so we're both leveling each other up. Just like we both level each other up as a competitor in the CrossFit space, we both want to level each other up as dads. And that should be a healthy conversation. How can we do better? How can we improve? It's not you versus me. It's us versus mediocrity. It's us versus, with this focus of leveling up. And that's where I'm at. And that's how I'm trying to surround myself with. And I think that others should be doing that. So if you're not joining the newsletter, that's your best bet to do it.
Man, and I love that idea because like competition raises the bar, but like beating someone at something makes it zero sum, which this isn't, right? Like you being a better dad than someone else that's also striving to be a better dad. Like, it's not like one is a good dad, one is a bad dad, right? There isn't a win and a loss. It's everyone can try and be the best man and dad they can be. And then we'll just level up as a group, which I think is like the perfect description for what we're trying to do with Train Hard, with trainhard.fit, with the Never Zero newsletter, with all of these things. It's yes, there's going to be a training aspect, there's content, but it's really a community. And I know that like the term community gets thrown out a lot. It's almost like been exhausted to this point, but we really are trying to build exactly that because I think it's lacking in our space, in our space being like fitness for men, dads, women as well. But I think that there's so much out there already, and if there's a different brand, whatever, that's like speaking to women in like a really good way, like, please, like, you have to find what works for you. We're trying to be something very specific for a specific group. And I think that, that's okay.
Well, I mean, think about it this way. Like, for so many years, this podcast, if you're listening to this and you're newer, started off as business of fitness. And I was completely dedicated to rising the tides of the fitness space by sharing best practices that we learned in our gym. That was what I was committed to. Do I still want to support gym owners and coaches? 100%. We do that through the NC Fit channel, and we're all about it. The goal of rising the tides from the fitness space was this concept of like, dude, I want to see gym owners be able to eat right and like go out to eat. I want to see them be able to provide their coaches with a living and have this entire industry be sustainable and people live well. Well, taking that a step further, a step different, is this concept of what we're working on with Train Hard, is this idea that we're trying to rise the tides of the dads out there and just men in general who we want to level up the entire ecosystem. I believe the pendulum has swung too far in different directions. And I want to be a source of inspiration to get dads uncomfortable, to doing hard things, to learn more about themselves and connect with other dads. And that's what we're about. And it's the exact same mentality I took to business of fitness, just with a little bit of a different audience and more focused approach based on where I'm at in my life today compared to where I was 15 years ago. That's it.
That's it, man. A book that I'm diving into, I just got it. I don't know if you've heard about it, of Boys and Men, why the modern male is suffering, why it matters and what to do about it. I'm really excited to get into it. It was highly recommended. And some of the sound bites in the recommendation for it was, like, as we've moved away from a lot of like manual labor, and as we've kind of like moved more towards, like a lot of the things that make up society now, like men have gotten weaker, they've gotten less healthy. There's a lot of like mental health struggles. Like, these things are very real. And it's a shame that it's gotten to the point where, like, with women specifically, it's like, how can we help, with equality and helping women and so on and so forth. And for men, it's a lot of like, well, just do better, right? Like, just toughen up, like pick yourself up by your bootstraps and do it, instead of having like real, like actionable, like, all right, what can you actually do? And even just a place for like, men to share what it is that they're working on and so on and so forth. So I'm excited to dive into the book. I'm really excited for what we're doing. And yeah, man.
Bro. Yeah. It reminds me of that book. Chop Wood, Carry Water, just a different mentality, but you got to let me know how that is. Chop Wood, Carry Water is a very short book. Basically, it talks about just being excellent. I think I was referred to it by Ben Bergeron. But yeah, for everybody listening, really appreciate you guys. Make sure you sign up for the newsletter. If you're enjoying these podcasts, simple ask, leave us a rating, leave us a review, hit us up on social. We always love hearing from you guys. So keep getting after it, keep training hard, and we'll see you again next week for another episode. Let's go.
Let's go.